Okay, so other than my very closest friends, I don't think I've ever told anybody the story about the narcissist that broke up my marriage, and that the same guy did it twice. And I think I kept quiet about it for so long because there's a lot of shame kind of built into it. I certainly played my part. I did things that were not good things, but I was also kind of targeted and attacked in a way that I did not have any defenses built up for it. Like, I had no way to counter what was coming my way. And I had issues that I didn't even know that I had that made me particularly easy to exploit. Now, I am not a doctor trying to give you mental health advice, no, but I know that hearing other people's stories is what really helped me put my own self back together. So even though I'm reading something from a script that's all typed out, that's because I'm trying to make sure I get the details right and I don't get overly upset or weepy about things that have happened. I'm just trying to be really authentic here, and maybe my mistakes will help somebody else process what they've been through. So let me back this up to the start. We're back in 2004. I am 19. I had gotten pregnant with my high school boyfriend, and we ended up getting married over it, but he really wasn't into the idea of being married as much as I was. And quite frankly, he had a lot of violent outbursts regularly enough that I shouldn't have let the wedding happen in the first place. Like, I should have spoken up, I should have done something, and I didn't. I wanted to be married, and I wanted to feel that kind of security of being married and pregnant, but the whole thing with him was just wrong from the start. I think I felt really ashamed of being labeled a baby mama, and I would have probably done anything to prevent feeling ostracized over it. But I have the baby, I drop out of college, which wasn't a huge deal at the time because I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself anyways. Then 2006 rolls around and I start feeling really anxious that I'm so behind everybody else that I graduated with. So I have no career path, I am not earning a degree, and I find the whole concept of being relegated to just a mommy just so triggering and belittling. Yeah, I love my kid, but it is not what my whole life is about. I am so much more than just a mother, and I want so much more out of my life than just fixating on my children. And there's some people, that's all they ever want to do. And, if that's for you, power to you. But that's not me. I'm really smart and I'm driven, and I've got more of a personality that is suited for being in a boardroom than, being at a mommy and me club. So getting pigeonholed like I have no other possible purpose in the world except to breed is something that I just find it really offensive. So I'm about to start college again at an entirely new school. It's coming up to be a few weeks before everything is about to start. And then, I can't even remember from where, probably MySpace, someone from my high school class popped up, and we ended up on a messenger program just talking a lot. His name is so basic, I probably don't even need to mask it, but I will just in case if I ever need that plausible deniability. But his name's Joe. He starts off just by catching up and being, just trace amounts of flirty with me, which seems kind of weird because I know in my profile it showed me as married, but some people are just naturally flirtatious, and I'm one of those people sometimes. If I'm comfortable with you, I can sort of cross that boundary where people think I'm flirting, and that's just sort of how I converse. So if you're my friend and we're on a very comfortable level with each other, I can be very touchy, I can be very eye contacty, I can be very, giggly and jokey and things that people often interpret as being flirty, even if I don't think I'm trying to flirt. But pretty quickly, Joe keeps telling me how amazing I am and how he used to be in love with me back in school, which, side note, I do remember a day in our senior year where he had, I think, just recently broken up with his girlfriend, and he turns around in class and goes, "I just want you to know, I have always been so in love with you," and turns back around. And I was so horrified and shocked and had no idea how to deal with that. I was just like, oh, good to know. And that was it. That's where it was left at that point. But, now it's a few years later and he's messaging me and he's saying how he'd love to get coffee and just pick my brain because I'm so interesting. And like I said, I am married, but I'm also still basically a child. I'm like 20, I think, at this point. I know legally you're an adult when you're 18, but your brain isn't fully developed until you're in your mid-20s, so you can't even see around corners yet, but you can legally, sign up for the military and get married and stuff. But I mean, really looking back at it, I was a child married to another child who gave no cares about meeting any mental or emotional needs that I had. And I felt cooped up as all get out because I'm basically locked up with a toddler all the time and completely isolated from any of my peers, which that was an issue that went hand in hand with marrying the guy that didn't feel right, is that he got very insecure about my friends and slowly sort of chopped them down away from me. And of course, I started dating this guy when I was 17, so I didn't have anything to compare it to really to say, that's a red flag versus, this is just what relationships are like. So in my mind, I have this guy who's in Messenger professing his love for me, and I'm getting this huge rush from it. Like, it's almost embarrassing. So I'm like, okay, let this guy flirt with you. What's the harm here? You guys live an hour apart. It's not like he's next door. It makes you feel good about yourself, and he's far enough away that it's not like you're going to get really emotionally invested here. Well, within a few days, the compliments increased to such an unhealthy level, and I couldn't even see it. It went from Joe saying that he had this kind of puppy love crush on me to I was perfect. And then probably within a few days of that, it was, I love you. And I don't mean like, oh, you're so adorable, I just love you kind of a thing where it's not really romantic. I mean, he was point blank, I love you, I want to marry you, I want to have children with you. And seriously, I'm not a stupid person normally. I have had guys before that kind of rush up on me and are way too quick to go, oh, I love you, or oh, I'm intimidated by you. And I see that, and it totally repulses me to where I can't even talk to the guy anymore. Like, it just kills the whole thing. You went too far too fast. But I had known Joe for so long, and there was almost something about him planting the seed in high school that he loved me to where it made all of his compliments just wave over me and convince me that this was some giant fairy tale romance that was 100% authentic. It was like I was wanted and valued as an individual person, not as a mom, not as a wife that someone didn't really want to have, that, this guy saw me. And everything I threw at him, like, I have a kid, or, I'm married, and I'm not going to leave that kind of stability just to casually date somebody. He had no problem with it. He was completely ready to go full speed forward. Every fear I had, he quelched it and acted like no issue mattered to him more than I did. He even told me at one point that he was meeting up with his lawyer to help me file for divorce so that I could be with him quicker. And remember, at this point, I have no job, and I'm only just getting back into school, so I would have been completely dependent on Joe for us to be able to build this life together. And even when I would insist that this was all too much for him, or this was too good to be true, he would insist right back that I was all he ever wanted, so it didn't matter. Like, the details will work out, but let's just make it so we can be together. And this had all been online at this point. So we had decided to meet up during my second day back at college, because, my kid would be in daycare all day and no one would be around to question where I went. And I can say with complete certainty that the feelings I had online did not translate the same in person. First, I showed up too early, and because I thought we were madly in love and about to move in together, I had actually stopped at a gas station, bought a physical map to fold out because GPS wasn't even a real thing at that point, and I had looked up where Joe lived. So I parked outside his house, called him up like I was going to be doing the sweetest surprise ever, and Joe flips out and tells me I can't come inside, that I was too early, and why would I do this? And I was furious. I drove away, parked at a gas station, and just was crying my eyes out when my phone started ringing and he asked me to come back. And he was swearing, it's not what you think. I'm not with another girl. Stop accusing him of being with another girl. Which the fact that didn't chase me away is like, what was wrong with me? Like, if I am seeing a romantic interest for the very first time and I'm already feeling like I'm being blocked off because there might be a girl hidden behind the door, I mean, what kind of crazy person says, okay, let's let him smooth that over? Apparently me. I'm that person. Hi, how are ya? But I had to have wanted him to make me feel better and smooth it over because he talked me into coming back. He still wouldn't let me inside of his house, but we went off and milled around for the day. I think we were around town and we went to the mall and, we were just kind of out and about. I remember we had dinner at like maybe Applebee's, something like that. And all I can really remember about eating out with him was just feeling so awkward and so sick to my stomach about everything that I could barely eat. But here I am with my fairy tale prince right in front of me, and I remember thinking, this doesn't feel right. The chemistry was just off to where it was almost uncomfortable. We didn't know how to speak to each other without a computer as a buffer. And it was kind of like seeing this ad for a swanky hotel, but then you get there and it's all grimy and dingy. Like, not Joe as a person. I don't mean to say that he was physically disgusting, but it was a whole vibe between us where the expectation did not match the reality. So it was more awkward first date with someone you won't go out with again, and a lot less of this is the one type of a feeling when I met him, you know what I mean? All the same though, at some point we were driving around and he pulls out his mother's old engagement ring and tries to propose to me, which for whatever reason, even though this was a future that I had desperately wanted earlier that day, my brain freaked out. Like, I wouldn't open my eyes to look at the ring. I wouldn't take the ring. I just sat in the passenger seat and pretended to not even notice what he was trying to do. I don't think I could have handled that any worse, but the whole thing just felt too uncomfortable to try and deal with in the moment. So by the end of our day together, which was probably like 5 or 6 hours straight, I just felt like, what the hell am I doing here? I was starting to think that maybe I did not want this relationship at all, but then we got back to messaging online again and it all kind of smoothed over. But for me, I was like, okay, well, let's keep this an open-ish avenue and see if our in-person feelings develop to a better place. But I mean, overall, I really did not feel great after seeing Joe in person. Like, there was no, yes, this is what I want to do. This is magical. Here's sparks flying. It just wasn't there. Then here's where it got interesting. I had completely forgotten that my spouse and I shared a laptop that my messenger service was logged into. So Joe starts sending me messages that don't ding to my desktop, but pop up directly in front of my spouse. And again, we didn't particularly get along together. We weren't a good couple together, but there was a very controlling aspect with the financials and what I was able to do. And he had a very bad, violent tendency, and I'm going to try and leave it at that. And apparently my spouse at that time was very alarmed to see a man's name pop up in my messenger. But let me be honest, he wasn't exactly the most brilliant of individuals, so he didn't go about it in any smart way. He's asking Joe things like, how do we know each other? When was the last time we spoke? So, it's really obvious that it's not me responding, and Joe immediately picks up on what's going on and plays the whole thing off in a way that keeps me out of any violent retaliation. But I didn't know any of that when my spouse came into my room to question me. Basically, I got confronted and I didn't confirm or deny anything, but there was a big enough freak out that my spouse went storming off on foot, and pretty much fearing what was going to happen when he came back, I decided to slap the panic button and went running to Joe. And I'm not saying that that was a good thing to do. I'm not saying any of this was the good or right thing to do, but I was scared at that point. And really, in that moment, in my panic-stricken mind, I was kind of rationalizing it and going, well, after all, Joe and I are going to have this whole rest of our lives relationship. And even though earlier that day had gone less than swell, Joe still said that he wanted us together. So it was all just going to happen a few months faster than we were anticipating. And I remember just being so certain about Joe's love for me that I didn't even ask him if I could come. I might have called him on the way down to his house, but I was very point blank that, hey, I'm coming right now. Nuclear option. I have to come. And he did let me in his house this time. But it was really strange because I felt very corralled between the living room, the bedroom, and the bathroom. It was not a very make yourself at home environment. He didn't want me to meet his dogs. He didn't want to, give me a house tour. It was weird. And I had basically run away from my house in such a hurry that I had my purse and that was it. No clothes, nothing. And I remember laying in bed next to Joe that night feeling so incredibly strange, probably just reeling from how unexpected everything went. And Joe started almost pressuring me to sleep with him, which we had not done before. Again, another big red flag of what the heck was I doing here? But I was just so overwhelmed and frazzled by everything that I was not into, banging the guy. It was not what I wanted to do in that moment. And the more I resisted, the more Joe kind of tried to pull me in. And at one point he said, "Come on, baby, pay rent." And I remember that something about that just triggered me so hard that I just sat right up and stood out of the bed. And I could barely breathe at that point. I was getting so overloaded. Then the next thing I knew, Joe was telling me that this wasn't going to work between us and that now he sees my spouse as a real person because he talked to him on Messenger for 3 or 4 responses. So I needed to go home to him, which, when you are worried about a violent backlash, that's not really an option. So it's 1 a.m. at this point, and Joe is kicking me out of his house when that morning I was the love of his life. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It was so surreal. And I was so scared and broken and raw at that point that I remember just begging him to let me sleep on his couch because I did not want to come home to have a fist in my face. And I even said, you know what, just let me sleep on your couch tonight, just even as a friend. I'll get up and leave for my college classes in the morning and I won't bother you anymore after that. But the answer was a hard, no, you need to get out. And the whole thing was just so weird. Even today, looking back on it, I don't understand it. Because Joe went so quickly from, oh, baby, I want to sleep with you, to this very soft but firm, no, you need to get out of my house. Nothing I could think of would let me wrap my brain around it, and I blame myself so hard. Oh, if only I had slept with him, if only I didn't get out of that bed, if only I hadn't made that one wrong move, everything would have been happily ever after. And I ended up living in my car for a while after that because I was so afraid and disgusted with my marriage after that. And, you can't be in love with somebody else and then go back and try to fix things with a person is wrong for you. But really, the only thing that saved me and let me land on my feet was my dearest friend in the world, Danielle, who met me in the aftermath of all of this and kind of helped me put my mind back together, and she gave me a place to live so that I could get my life back together. I mean, living with her was probably the best living situation I have ever had. Nobody was watching me or controlling where I could go or who I could talk to, and I was so happy in so many ways. But I think because she started falling for a guy that she was definitely going to end up marrying, I kind of felt my safe place vanishing, so I made different life choices. I mean, if it could have been her and me doing the Tuca and Birdie thing for the rest of eternity, I would have been so down for that. But I think knowing that she was about to move on, that I had to put a better situation in front of myself. But we'll circle back to that part later. The strangest thing about being dumped by Joe, though, was that I was in such a tailspin that I was literally sick over it. This had been a relationship that started really superficial just to boost my own broken down self-esteem. Yeah, let that guy tell me I'm great and keep his distance, Wonderful. That's what the internet's good for, right? But then I was continuing completely sucked into this fantasy life that he wanted, and I thought I wanted it too. I mean, even after I saw him in person and left feeling so uncomfortable, almost like the relationship was something that I knew I needed to put an end to eventually, I was still completely devastated when Joe cut me off. I couldn't sleep anymore. I couldn't eat anymore. I was so torn apart because Joe said he loved me, but then left me so callously. And it took a long time for me to put my mind back together. I was the most hurt that I have ever been in my whole life. And I was so desperate for Joe to reach out to me again and just make me feel like this hadn't been some twisted up game. Like, let's reset, let me get on top of this and feel like I have some control or relief from this horrible feeling of being dumped so abruptly. And I even had exes of Joe's reach out and try to put my head on straight, telling me that this is what Joe does, and I'm not even the first person that he proposed to with that exact same ring. But the more they told me I wasn't special, the more I kind of fell apart, because Joe's targeted gaze made me feel like I was the only person in the world that mattered to him. And I was just so convinced that I had been the one to mess something up and that I ruined everything. And mind you, this wasn't even a relationship that I was confident that I wanted as soon as I saw him in person. I mean, my gut reaction, which I chose not to trust, was, maybe not. But still, being thrown away by someone who insisted that we were soulmates shattered me in such a way that I went absolutely insane. I don't know any other way to describe it. I had my friends trying to reach out to him to convince him to contact me again and talk to me and give me another chance. I was making public MySpace posts basically begging for his attention, even to the point that I was trying to make him jealous one minute and swearing that I would be fine being one of many girls he dated the next. I'm not looking to be a polygamist. Like, what am I doing? But that's just how badly I wanted him to come back and talk to me again. I have never in my life felt so absolutely crazy before. And it actually took several weeks, maybe even a couple months, but eventually Joe calls me, leaves me a voicemail as if nothing had happened. And at that point, I was really so far removed and healed from the situation that I remember just playing the voicemail for Danielle and ranting about his audacity, but I never called him back, and I don't think he ever tried to call me a second time. He did pop up in my messenger a few more times, but Joe was very cold and distant, and it seemed like he was trying to pick at me, whereas before he had always been trying to build me up. So it felt so different, and it was so confusing. But I didn't go back down the lovey-dovey path with him, so it didn't take very long before he just completely dropped out of my life. And that was the first marriage that Joe ended for me, which, again, it was not a good, strong marriage to begin with, and it would have toppled over before long anyways. So losing that marriage is not really a loss for me. I mean, I know that sounds like really bad and harsh, but it was a bad fit all around. Everything about it was bad. And that's why somebody was able to lure me away, you know? But I'm going to do a part 2 to this and get to more details about Joe returning when I'm in my second marriage. And buckle up, buckaroos.